The alien widow's hunger. The night was cold and the sky was full of broken smoke from burned cities. She walked alone, her steps slow and heavy, her body weak, her stomach empty. She was not like the humans who lived in the villages nearby. She was different, her skin pale silver, her eyes glowing faint in the dark. She was an alien widow and she had lost everything. Her mate had died in the last war. Her home was destroyed, her people scattered. She carried nothing but her sorrow and the long hunger that cut her from inside. She had not eaten in days. Her legs shook when she tried to move. She hid in shadows because humans hated her kind. If they saw her, they would chase her. Maybe, even kill her. But she was too weak to care. Her only wish was to survive one more night. The alien widow sat near the ruins of a broken wall. She listened to the wind and she thought of her mate. She remembered his promise that one day they would have children. Now that dream was ashes. Now she was only a shadow in a land that wanted her gone. Her hunger grew stronger. She looked at the lights of the human village from far away. The smell of food reached her nose. Bread, meat, soup. Her mouth filled with water. Her body shook harder. But fear stopped her steps. If she went close, the humans might find her, and then it would be the end. The widow pressed her hands on her empty stomach. She wanted to scream, but she stayed silent. Her people had always been proud, never begging, never bowing. But now she was nothing more than a beggar of scraps. Her eyes burned with shame. She wished the cold night would take her quickly. As she sat in the dark, she heard something. A small sound, light footsteps. She turned fast, ready to defend herself. Her claws were weak, but her heart still beat with fire. Out of the shadows came not a soldier, not an enemy, but a little girl. The girl was small, maybe 7 years old. She carried something in her hands wrapped in cloth. Her hair was messy, her dress old, yet her eyes were bright, brave, and curious. The alien widow froze, shocked. Why would a human child come here? To her, alone. This was strange. Too strange. The little girl walked closer, without fear. She opened the cloth and showed what she carried. It was a piece of bread, dry and half-eaten. The girl stretched out her hand, offering it. The widow's chest rose and fell. Her pride said, "No, do not take it." But her hunger cried louder. Her hand shook as she reached forward. Slowly, she took the bread. She ate it like it was treasure. Every bite burned her throat and healed it at the same time. The girl smiled, her small face soft. "You are hungry," the child said, her voice calm. The alien widow could not answer. Her people had no words for this kind of kindness. She wanted to ask why, but her voice failed. The girl only nodded, as if she already knew. For the first time in many moons, the widow felt something strange. It was not hunger, not fear, not pain. It was hope, tiny and fragile. She looked at the girl and wondered who she was. Why was this human helping her? The world was cruel, yet this small human gave light. The girl leaned closer and her eyes shone with mischief. "My father is strong," she whispered. "He works hard, he eats meat every night, but he is sad, he is lonely." The alien widow listened, confused. The child's words did not make sense. But then the girl said something that froze her heart. "If you marry my dad, you will never be hungry again." The widow stared, her bread falling from her hand. She thought she had misheard, but the child was serious, her eyes wide with innocence. Marry a human, a soldier, the enemy of her kind. Her pride screamed no, her fear screamed louder, but her hunger, her loneliness, her empty chest whispered yes. The wind howled around them. The stars looked down in silence. The widow sat still, the bread forgotten. Her stomach was no longer the only thing aching, now her heart beat fast with confusion. She was a widow, a stranger, a beggar. And yet a child had given her food and a promise of something more. The night grew darker, but in her chest, a spark of light began to burn. She did not know if it was hope or danger, but she knew this meeting would change her life, forever. The next morning came with gray light. The alien widow stayed hidden in the broken shed near the fields, her body still weak but her heart restless. She could not forget the little human girl who had offered her bread. She could not forget the strange words whispered under the stars. "Marry my dad. You will never be hungry again," the widow asked herself many times. Why would a child speak like that? Why would she bring food to a stranger, an enemy? It made no sense, yet the bread had been real, and the kindness had been real too. The memory warmed her more than the food. When the sun rose higher, the shed door opened with a soft sound. There she was again, the same little girl, carrying a basket this time. Her steps were quiet, her smile full of secrets. She pushed the basket forward, showing fruit, bread, even a small piece of cheese. The alien widow's chest tightened. So much food, too much for a child to give alone, but the girl only giggled. "You must eat if you want to live," she whispered. "You look like them. Wind will blow you away." The widow stared at her. She wanted to ask who she was. She wanted to ask where the food came from, but her tongue stayed heavy. Her people had always spoken with strength, not with questions. Still, she managed one word, soft and rough. "Why?" The little girl's eyes shone with mischief and innocence. "Because you are alone," she said simply. "And my father is alone too." The alien widow felt her chest ache. Two lonelinesses compared by a child. It was strange, but it was true. The girl sat beside her, as if the shed was safe. She began to talk, her voice rising and falling like a song. She told the widow about her life, about the small house at the edge of the village, about her father, a strong man who worked with soldiers, about how he cooked simple meals, how he fixed broken walls. But when he thought no one was watching, he sat silent and sad. The alien widow listened in silence. Every word painted a picture of a man she had never met. A man who was tired but who still cared for his child. A man who had lost something, perhaps a wife, perhaps a dream. The girl's voice softened when she spoke of her mother. "She went away long ago," the child whispered. "My father does not smile much anymore." The widow's eyes lowered. She understood that pain. She too had lost her mate, her family, her people. Grief was the same in every world. It cut hearts no matter the skin, no matter the blood. The girl leaned closer, her small hands gripping the alien's silver fingers. "You are strong," she said. "Even if you look weak now, I can see it. My father needs someone strong, and you need someone to keep you safe." The words felt heavy, impossible. How could a child speak of such things? But her eyes were clear, innocent, full of strange wisdom. The widow turned her face away. Her pride told her to walk, to never return. But her hunger, her loneliness, and something else, something she could not name, kept her still. She had never thought of being part of a human family. It was forbidden, impossible. Yet here was a little girl offering her food, offering her a place. The sound of voices echoed from far away. The girl jumped, quickly pulling the shed door tighter. "Soldiers are near," she whispered. "They do not like strangers. They do not like your kind." Fear filled the widow's chest. Her claws curled, her body tense. If the soldiers found her, she would not live. The girl shook her head, her face firm. "Stay quiet, I will protect you." The alien widow's eyes widened. A human child protecting her. It was madness. Yet the child's courage was real. For a moment, she saw not weakness, but fire in the girl's heart. The voices, past fading into distance, the girl sighed in relief and smiled again. "You see," she said softly, "no one must know. It is our secret." The widow nodded slowly. A secret? Yes. A dangerous secret, but also a precious one. She had nothing. In this world, nothing left to lose, but now she had a secret to keep. A secret that carried bread and warmth and maybe something more. As the day turned to evening, the girl left the shed. She promised to return the next night with more food. The widow watched her small figure run through the fields. The alien's chest was full of questions. Who was this child? Why was she so fearless, and what kind of father waited in that house? She closed her eyes. For the first time in many days, she felt not only hunger, she felt curiosity, and even a quiet spark of hope. The days passed slowly, and the alien widow stayed hidden in the broken shed. Each night the little girl brought food, bread, fruit, even water in a jar. The widow's body grew stronger, but her heart grew heavier. She knew this secret could not last forever. Humans were not blind, someone would notice, and most dangerous of all, the girl's father would soon return. The child spoke of him often. Her father was tall, with a voice that could make soldiers listen. He was strong, but also quiet, always carrying sadness in his eyes. The widow wondered why the girl wanted her to meet him. What kind of human man would accept an alien in his home? The thought was strange, yet the girl repeated it with a smile. You will see he is kind, even if he does not show it. On the fourth night, the girl whispered in excitement, My father is coming back tomorrow. Her eyes shone bright, but the widow's chest filled with fear. If the man found her, would he raise his weapon? Would he drag her into the streets? Or would he listen to his daughter's impossible wish? The next day, the air grew tense. The widow stayed low in the shed, but her sharp ears heard voices. Boots on the road, laughter of soldiers, metal clinking. And then, a deeper sound, a heavy step that made the earth tremble in her chest. He had returned, the father of the little girl. The girl ran out of her house, her voice high with joy. Father, father, she cried. The widow could not see them from the shed, but she could hear. The man's voice was rough, tired, but soft when he spoke to his daughter. Little one, I missed you, he said. The widow closed her eyes. That voice carried both strength and sorrow. It was the voice of someone who had lost much. Just as she had, as night fell, the widow thought of leaving. She could slip away into the fields, vanish before the man discovered her. But when she looked at the bread the girl had left, her heart hesitated. She was no longer only hungry. She was tied to this strange family, even if it made no sense. The sound of footsteps broke her thoughts. Not the light steps of the child, but heavy, steady ones. The shed door creaked open, and in the doorway stood a shadow. The man, tall, broad, with eyes sharp as steel, he held a weapon in his hand, ready. His gaze fell on her, and in an instant he knew. Someone had been hiding here, someone not human. The alien widow rose slowly, her body tense, her claws curled, her heart pounding. She was ready to fight, ready to die. Her kind had died before in human hands. If this was her end, she would not beg. The man stepped closer, his weapon raised, his jaw clenched, his eyes cold. Who are you? He demanded. The widow said nothing, only stared back with glowing eyes. The silence grew sharp between them. But then, before either could move, a small voice cut through the air. Stop, the girl cried. She ran into the shed, her arms wide, standing between them. Do not hurt her, she is my friend. The man froze, his weapon still raised. His daughter's words struck him harder than any enemy. Your friend, he repeated, his voice low. With disbelief, she is not one of us, she is dangerous. The girl shook her head, her small hands pressing against his chest. No, she is not dangerous, she is lonely, she is hungry. The widow stared at the child, her heart burning. No one had ever spoken for her like this, not since her mate's death. This little human stood like a shield, protecting her with nothing but love. The man's eyes narrowed, his grip on the weapon tight. He looked from his daughter to the alien. He saw the hollow cheeks, the trembling hands, the tired eyes. Not a warrior, not a threat, but still an alien, an enemy. His voice shook with anger and confusion. Why did you hide her? Why bring her food? The girl's answer was soft, but firm. Because she needs us, and we need her. Her words carried the weight of a secret hope. The man frowned, his heart torn. He wanted to protect his daughter, to keep her safe. But the truth was there, bright in the child's eyes. The girl turned to her father, her face shining with innocence and courage. If you marry her, she will stay. She will never be hungry again, and you will never be alone. Again, the words hit like a storm. The widow's breath caught. The man's eyes widened. For a moment, the world was silent. The father stared at his daughter, then at the alien widow. The shed seemed too small for the weight of that moment. The widow lowered her eyes, torn between shame and hope. The man lowered his weapon, but his voice was still sharp. "This is madness," he whispered. But in his chest something began to stir, something he thought had died long ago. The night after the father discovered the alien widow, silence filled the small house in the shed. The father did not trust her. The widow did not trust him. Only the little girl smiled with courage, standing between them like a bridge. Her words still echoed in both their hearts. "If you marry her, she will never be hungry again, and you will never be alone again." The widow sat by the corner of the shed, her eyes lowered. She expected the man to drive her out, to call the soldiers, but he had not. He had lowered his weapon, though. His face was hard. Something in his daughter's tears had stopped him. Something in the alien's tired eyes had made him hesitate. The next morning, the widow tried to leave. She stepped out into the gray light, her body tense, ready to run. But the girl caught her hand. "Stay," she whispered. "You are family now." The widow's chest tightened at that word. Family. She had not heard it in so long. She wanted to pull away, but her legs refused. Her hunger and her loneliness tied her to this small human home. The father came out of the house, his eyes sharp. He placed a small loaf of bread on the table outside. His voice was rough. "If you stay, you follow my rules. You eat here, you hide here, and you do not bring danger to my child." The widow lifted her head slowly. Her pride screamed to refuse, but she nodded because she had nowhere else to go. That day was strange. The widow sat at the edge of the small kitchen fire, the girl skipping around her with joy. The father watched every move, his hand never far from his weapon. The air was thick with tension, yet there was warmth too. The widow touched bread and soup with trembling fingers. It had been so long since she had eaten at a table. Every bite felt unreal, like a dream she was not allowed to have. The little girl laughed. "See, father, she is not dangerous. She eats just like us." The father did not laugh, but his eyes softened for a moment. The widow noticed, though. She said nothing. At night, she returned to the shed, not the house. The father would not allow her inside. Not yet. But the girl brought her blankets, warm and heavy. The widow pressed her face into the cloth and felt tears burn her eyes. This was more comfort than she had known since the war. Still, fear lived in her chest. Fear of being discovered, fear of being betrayed. But stronger than fear was the strange pull she felt toward this human child, and even toward the father who watched her with guarded eyes. Days turned into a rhythm. The widow helped with small chores, gathering wood, fixing broken baskets. The girl showed her flowers in the field, taught her little songs. The father spoke little, but his silence grew less sharp each day. Sometimes she caught him watching her when he thought she would not notice, not with hate but with questions he could not ask. One evening, the widow tried to cook. She took roots and herbs, mixing them as her people once did. The smell rose, strange but sweet, filling the small yard. The girl clapped her hands, delighted. The father raised his brow but tasted a spoonful. For the first time in many years, a small smile touched his lips. It was quick, gone in an instant. But the widow saw it, and it lit a spark inside her heart. But peace is never safe for long. Whispers spread through the village. Neighbors noticed the father's house smelled of strange herbs. They saw shadows moving at night. They began to ask questions. One man told another, then another. Soon the soldiers might hear, and suspicion would grow. The widow felt it in the air. When she walked near the edge of the fields, eyes followed her. When the girl laughed too loud, voices hushed. Danger was close, like a storm waiting to break. One night, as the girl slept, the widow whispered to the father, "You should send me away." Her voice was low, heavy with fear and shame. "If they find me here, they will hurt you, and they will take your child." The father's face was hard in the firelight, but he shook his head, his voice quiet. "My daughter wants you here," he said. and I will not break her heart." The widow looked at him, shocked. He still did not trust her. But he had chosen his daughter's joy over his own safety for a moment. Their eyes met in that silence. Something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not yet, but a fragile thread of understanding. The strange family had begun, not by choice, not by plan, but by a child's wish. They were tied together now, bound by food, by fear, by loneliness, and though danger crept closer each day, the widow felt her hunger change. She was no longer starving only for bread. She was starving for belonging. The days of quiet living did not last. The widow, the father, and the little girl lived in a fragile peace. But peace is like thin glass. One small stone can break it. And soon, the stone came. It began with whispers. Villagers talked in low voices, their eyes turning toward the father's house. They spoke of strange smells, of shadows at night, of something not human. Fear grows quickly in hearts that are already wounded by war. Fear becomes anger, and anger calls soldiers. One morning, heavy boots marched into the village. Soldiers in dark coats carried weapons, their faces sharp with suspicion. They knocked on doors, asked questions. "Have you seen any outsiders? Any of the enemy?" They demanded. The villagers pointed with nervous hands. "Over there, the house of the lonely soldier. Something strange happens there." The widow felt the danger before she saw it. Her skin burned with instinct, her chest heavy. She looked at the father, who sat sharpening his blade by the fire. He did not speak, but his jaw was tight. The girl ran to her father, whispering, "They are coming." The father rose, his eyes cold. He looked at the widow, his voice low but strong. "You must stay hidden. Do not move. Do not speak." The widow nodded, though her heart pounded. She knew soldiers would not listen. They would only strike. Her claws curled in fear and fury. She hated hiding, but she had no choice. The soldiers reached the house, their boots thundering on the wooden steps. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, banged on the door. "Open!" he shouted. The father opened it slowly, standing tall. His weapon rested against the wall, but his eyes were sharp. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice calm. The soldiers pushed inside. They searched every corner, their boots scraping against the floorboards. The little girl clung to her father's leg, her eyes wide. Her small body shook, but she did not cry. One soldier reached the shed. The widow's breath froze. She crouched low, pressing herself into the shadows. Her heart beat like thunder. The soldier pushed the door open, shining a torch inside. The light swept across the walls, across the broken wood. It stopped just short of her face. For one long moment, time stood still. The widow did not breathe. The soldier frowned, then turned away. "Nothing here," he called. The door closed again. The widow sagged against the wall, her claws trembling. She had been one breath away from death, but fate had spared her for now. Inside the house, the scar-faced leader turned to the father. "You live here alone with your daughter," he said. "You should be careful. Outsiders bring disease and danger." The father's face was stone. "We are fine," he answered. But the leader's eyes narrowed. "Are you?" he asked softly. "Because if we find you hiding one of them, you and your daughter will pay the price." The little girl's hand gripped her father tighter, her eyes filled with silent tears. The widow hidden in the shed heard every word, her chest burned. With guilt, she was the danger. She was the reason soldiers threatened them. Maybe she should leave, disappear into the night. But when she thought of leaving, her heart twisted. She thought of the little girl's laughter, of the bread, of the word family. She could not walk away, not yet. When the soldiers finally left, the air remained heavy. The father sat by the fire, silent. The girl looked between him and the shed, her small face pale. "They will come back," she whispered. The father nodded, his eyes dark. "They will," he said. His gaze shifted toward the shed. "And next time, they may not leave empty-handed." The widow stepped out slowly, her head bowed. "You should send me away," she said. her voice rough. "I will only bring death to your home." The father looked at her, his eyes hard, but the girl ran forward, her voice breaking. "No, if she goes, I will go too." Her words fell like thunder. The father froze, shocked. The widow stared at the child, tears burning her eyes. Why would this small human fight so hard for her? The father clenched his fists, his voice heavy. "You do not understand. They will kill us all." The girl shook her head, standing firm. "You are strong, father, and she is strong too. Together we can fight." Her voice was filled with a fire that silenced the room. The widow lifted her head slowly. She met the father's eyes. In them she saw fear, but also a hidden question. Could they fight together? Could they survive as one? The air between them was sharp with danger and heavy with unspoken choices. Outside, the soldiers' boots faded into the distance, but their shadow remained over the house. The strange family had been discovered, and now every day would be a battle between survival and exposure. The widow touched the little girl's hair gently, her voice soft but filled with promise. "I will not let them take you," she said. And though her body still trembled with fear, her heart carried new strength. The storm had begun, and there was no turning back. The night was heavy with silence. The father sat near the fire, sharpening his blade again and again. The little girl slept close to the hearth, her small hand curled around a wooden doll. The alien widow sat in the shadows of the shed, her thoughts dark, her chest burning with guilt. She knew she could not stay, not after the soldiers had come so close. If she left, the child and her father would be safe. If she stayed, danger would follow them like a shadow. The widow rose slowly, stepping into the night. The stars looked down cold and sharp. Her claws curled as she whispered to herself, "I must go. It is the only way." But as she took her first step toward the fields, a soft voice called, "Where are you going?" The father stood in the doorway, his blade glinting in the moonlight. His eyes were tired but steady. The widow froze, her heart racing. "I will leave," she said, her voice low. "They will kill you if I stay." The father walked closer, his face hard. "You think leaving will save us?" he asked. "They already suspect your faces, not the danger their hate is." The widow's eyes burned. "I cannot bring death to the child," she whispered. But the father shook his head. "You already brought her something else?" he said quietly. "You brought her hope." The widow turned her face away. Hope was a dangerous thing. Hope could break hearts when it died, but before she could answer, the night shattered with a sound. Boots, many boots, marching fast, voices shouting, weapons clinking. The soldiers had returned. The father cursed under his breath, grabbing his blade. The widow's claws flexed, her body trembling. She had been ready to die before, but now the thought of leaving the child unprotected cut her deeper than hunger ever had. The soldiers spread through the village, torches lighting the dark. Their leader barked orders. "Search every shed, every barn. No one hides from us." The widow and the father looked at each other. There was no time left. They had to fight or be dragged away. The father moved first, pushing the widow back. "Stay with my daughter," he said, his voice sharp. "If I fall, take her and run." The widow's chest ached. This man who had once pointed a weapon at her was now ready to die to protect her. But she could not let him stand alone. The soldiers stormed the shed, torches burning bright. The widow leapt forward, her claws flashing, her body moving with desperate strength. She struck one soldier across the chest, his torch falling into the dirt. The father swung his blade, steel meeting steel. The little girl woke with a scream, clutching her doll. The fight filled the night with fire and blood. The widow's body burned with old power. She moved faster than she thought possible. Her claws tore, her eyes glowed, but there were too many. The father bled from his arm, his blade heavy. The soldiers pressed closer, their voices filled with rage. The widow looked at the girl, who cried by the fire. Her small voice cut through the battle. "Please do not leave me." The widow's chest tore open with that sound. She could not leave, not now, not ever. With a scream, she threw herself into the center of the fight. She blocked the soldiers from reaching the child, her claws striking with fury. Every move was pain, every breath was fire, but she did not stop. The father fought beside her, their movements clumsy but strong. alien claws and human steel side by side. For a moment, they were not enemies. They were one wall, one shield. The scar-faced leader stepped forward, rage burning in his eyes. "You think you can hide with them?" he shouted. "You are filth, and they are traitors." The widow bared her teeth, her voice rising like thunder. "This is my family," she roared, "and I will die before I let you touch them." The soldiers hesitated, shocked by her fury. And in that pause, the father struck, his blade cutting across the leader's arm. The man fell back with a cry. The other soldiers pulled him away, retreating into the dark. The village echoed with silence again. Only the sound of fire crackling and heavy breathing remained. The widow collapsed to her knees, her body shaking, blood on her claws. The father knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "You fought for us," he whispered, his voice filled with something new, respect and maybe more. The little girl ran forward. Wrapping her arms around the widow's waist, her tears soaked the alien's skin. "You did not leave me," she cried. The widow held her close, her voice breaking. "Never, I promise." The night had been filled with danger and blood. But out of it, something stronger was born, not just survival, but a bond sealed in battle. The widow had chosen she would not leave, she would not run. This was her family now, and she would fight the world for them. The night of battle left the house broken. Ash from the fallen torches painted the ground black. The shed stood half-burned, the air heavy with smoke. The father's arm bled through a torn cloth. The alien widow's claws were dark with dried blood, and the little girl clung to them both, her face streaked with tears. But the soldiers had retreated, at least for now. The family had survived, not by chance, not by mercy, but by standing together, alien and human, once enemies, now bound by something stronger. The widow sat near the fire, her body weak but her heart fierce. The girl sat in her lap, resting as if nothing in the world could harm her. The father watched them quietly, his eyes shadowed with questions. He had not chosen this, not at first, but he could not deny what had happened. The alien had saved his daughter. She had stood beside him when death came, and now she was no longer only a guest or a secret. She was part of them. In the morning, the village whispered again. People had heard the fight, seen the flames. Some said the soldier's house was cursed. Others whispered that he was hiding an alien woman. Fear spread quickly, but so did something else. A strange curiosity, a quiet respect. For no one had seen a human and an alien fight side by side before. The widow walked through the yard at dawn, her body still aching. Eyes followed her from a distance, some filled with hate, others with wonder. She ignored them, for she had no pride left to guard. Only one thing mattered now: the child's smile, the father's silent trust. When the girl ran to her with open arms, the widow bent low, holding her close. She was no longer only hungry for food, she was hungry for belonging, and at last, she had found a taste of it. The father spoke little that day, but his actions spoke louder. He fixed the shed, stronger this time. He shared his food without hesitation. He stood beside the widow when soldiers passed again. His silence was not cold anymore. It was heavy, yes, but heavy with thought, heavy with choice. Something inside him was changing. The walls he had built since his wife's death were cracking, and through those cracks, light was entering. The little girl, as always, carried the fire of innocence. She told her neighbors proudly, "This is my friend, she is family now." Some scolded her, others shook their heads, but the girl's words planted seeds, seeds of doubt in old hatred, seeds of wonder in tired hearts. The widow knew the danger had not ended. The scar-faced soldier would return stronger, angrier. The village might turn against them. But she also knew she was no longer alone. She had a promise to keep. She had told the girl she would never leave. And her promise was stronger than her fear. One evening, the father sat by the fire, the widow opposite him. The girl slept between them, her head on the widow's lap. The firelight made shadows dance across the walls. The father finally spoke, his voice low. "You could have run that night, but you stayed." The widow's eyes lifted slowly, glowing in the dark. I stayed because she called me mother, she whispered. The father's jaw tightened, his gaze falling to the sleeping child. For a long time, he said nothing. Then his eyes rose, again meeting hers. And now, he asked. The widow touched the girl's hair gently. Now I stay because this is home. The father's face softened, the silence between them no longer sharp but deep. It carried grief, it carried healing, it carried the shape of something new. Neither of them spoke of marriage, neither of them spoke of love, but the air held both, quiet and unformed, not yet words but seeds waiting to grow. The next day, soldiers returned to the village, but they did not storm the house. They watched from a distance, unsure. Even they had seen the fight. Even they had seen the alien stand as protector. Fear was still there, but so was doubt, and doubt is the first crack in hatred. The widow stood tall, the girl's hand in hers, the father at her side. They did not hide anymore. They did not bow. They faced the world as a family, strange and fragile, but real, the villagers whispered. The soldiers frowned. The world would not forgive easily. But the widow no longer begged for forgiveness. She no longer begged for food. She had found her place, her family, her promise, and she would fight for it until her last breath. The little girl smiled, her eyes shining with joy. I told you, she whispered to the widow. You are not alone anymore. The widow held her tighter, her heart burning with strength, not the strength of claws or hunger, but the strength of love. And in that strength, a new beginning was born.